I found out why my dad never let us go in the garage, and I wish I hadn't. I'm holding a shovel right now, and my hands won't stop shaking. Growing up, Dad's garage was completely off limits. Not just don't touch my tools off limits, but padlocked, with a chain and a deadbolt. Mom would get this weird look whenever we asked about it. Your father needs his space, she'd say, then change the subject fast. When I was 7, I tried to peek through the window once. Dad caught me and went ballistic, grounded, for a month. After that, I learned to just pretend the garage didn't exist. Dad died last Tuesday, a heart attack at 58. Mom's been a mess, so I volunteered to handle his stuff. She handed me the garage keys without a word, but her face went white. The first thing that hit me was the smell, sweet and chemical, like nail polish remover mixed with something rotten. The garage was split in two. The front half looked normal, a workbench, some tools, Christmas decorations. The back half had plastic sheeting hanging from the ceiling like a makeshift wall. I pushed through the plastic and my stomach dropped. There were dozens of glass containers lining metal shelves, each one filled with cloudy liquid. Each one had a label with a date and initials. J.M. 1987, S.K. 1991, R.H. 1994. My birth year was 1989, right between J.M. and S.K. I found a composition notebook on the workbench, Dad's handwriting. The first page made my blood freeze. It said, if something happens to me, burn everything. Don't let them find out what I did for the family. The entries went back 30 years. Names, dates, locations, people who, quote, wouldn't be missed, people who threatened our way of life. Each entry ended with the same chilling phrase. Dissolved successfully. Family protected. I counted 43 containers. Then, I found the recent entries. Mrs. Chen from down the street, the one who disappeared last month, the homeless guy who used to sleep by the bus stop, and the last entry, dated just 2 days before Dad died. It read, new neighbor asking too many questions about garage. Problem needs handling. Soon. That's when I heard it. Footsteps, crunching on the gravel driveway. I grabbed the shovel from the workbench and crept to the window. Mom was walking toward the garage, and she wasn't alone. 3 people I didn't recognize were with her, all of them carrying large black bags. She looked directly at the garage window and smiled. That same weird smile she used to give when we asked about the garage. Then I heard her voice, clear as day. I told you kids would figure it out eventually. Good thing we have a backup plan. The garage door started rattling. Someone was unlocking it from the outside. I pulled back from the window, my heart hammering against my ribs. The shovel felt slippery in my sweaty palms as I tried to process what I'd just heard. Mom knew. She'd always known. And now she was bringing reinforcements. The garage door rattled again, more violently this time. I could hear the deadbolt turning. My mind raced through my options. There was no back exit, no other way out except through that door they were unlocking. The plastic sheeting rustled as I stumbled backward, knocking into one of the metal shelves. A glass container wobbled dangerously. J.M. 1987. Some poor soul my father had dissolved 36 years ago, now reduced to cloudy liquid in a pickle jar. The chemical smell burned my nostrils as I steadied the shelf, my stomach churning. The door creaked open. Footsteps echoed on the concrete floor. Too many footsteps. I crouched behind the workbench, gripping the shovel like a baseball bat. Through a gap in the plastic sheeting, I could see shadows moving in the front half of the garage. He's back here somewhere. Mom's voice drifted through the plastic. She sounded so calm, so normal, like she was discussing the weather instead of hunting down her own son. A man's voice responded, rough and unfamiliar. Should have handled this when Frank first got sick. Too risky leaving the kid to clean up, Frank insisted. Mom replied. Said the boy deserved to know what kind of family he came from. Always was too sentimental. My blood turned to ice. What kind of family I came from? What the hell did that mean? The plastic sheeting rustled as someone pushed through. I pressed myself against the wall, trying to become invisible. Heavy boots scraped across the concrete, getting closer to my hiding spot. I could see the beam of a flashlight dancing across the ceiling. Come out, honey, Mom called softly. We're not going to hurt you. We just need to talk. Like hell, you're not going to hurt me. I thought about those 43 containers. About Mrs. Chen and the homeless guy. About the notebook entry mentioning the new neighbor asking too many questions. This family had been murdering people for 3 decades. And I was supposed to believe they just wanted to chat. The footsteps stopped right in front of the workbench. I held my breath. Muscles coiled like a spring. A hand appeared at the edge of the table, fingers drumming impatiently. Then a face peered around the corner. Middle-aged man with gray stubble and dead eyes. He smiled when he saw me. There you are. I swung the shovel as hard as I could. The metal blade caught him across the temple with a sickening crack. He dropped like a sack of potatoes, blood pooling beneath his head. Gary? Mom's voice sharpened with concern. Gary, what happened? I didn't wait to find out if Gary was dead or just unconscious. I vaulted over the workbench and sprinted toward the plastic sheeting. Shovel still clutched in my fist. The other 2 people were standing near the door. A woman with short blonde hair and a younger guy who looked like he could bench press a car. The woman reached for something in her jacket, but I was already moving. The shovel caught her in the shoulder, spinning her around. She screamed and stumbled into the Christmas decorations, sending boxes tumbling. Mom stepped into my path, her face a mask of disappointed resignation. You always were too much like them, she said quietly. We should have seen this coming. Like who? I demanded, raising the shovel. What are you talking about? Your parents, she said. Your real parents. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over Gary's motionless form. What? Frank and I couldn't have children, Mom continued. her voice taking on that same gentle tone she'd used when I was little and had nightmares. But we needed someone to carry on the work. Someone with the right instincts. Your biological parents were, well, they were very good at their job. Too good, unfortunately. My mind reeled. Adopted? I'd never suspected, never questioned why I looked nothing like either of my parents. But the way she was talking about my real parents, past tense, like they were dead. What happened to them? I whispered. Frank dissolved them in 1989, Mom said matter-of-factly. But not before we took what we needed. You were just 6 months old. Perfect age for bonding with new parents. The garage spun around me. I thought I might throw up. My father had murdered my biological parents and stolen me as a baby. And my mother, the woman who'd packed my school lunches and kissed my scraped knees, had been part of it all along. You're insane, I managed to choke out. We're practical, the blonde woman said from behind me. She was back on her feet, clutching her injured shoulder. Your birth parents were investigative journalists. They were getting too close to some very important people. People who pay us well to keep their secrets safe. So you killed them. We protected the natural order. Mom corrected. Do you have any idea how much chaos would have erupted if their story had been published? How many jobs would have been lost? How many families would have suffered? The younger guy had been silent this whole time, but now he stepped forward. His voice was surprisingly soft. Look, this doesn't have to get messy. You're one of us now. You've got the same instincts they had. We've been watching you your whole life. Every time you questioned authority, every time you dug too deep into things that didn't concern you. It's in your blood. I'm nothing like you, I spat. Aren't you? Mom tilted her head. Who do you think taught you to research so thoroughly? To ask the right questions? To see patterns others missed? You've been training for this your entire life without even knowing it? A horrible realization began to creep over me. All those times I'd gotten in trouble at school for challenging teachers. The way I'd always gravitated toward true crime documentaries and conspiracy theories. How I'd majored in journalism before switching to accounting because it felt safer. The network has been watching you, the blonde woman said, waiting to see if you'd inherited their talents. And you have. You found this place, decoded your father's notebook, connected the dots. Most people would have just called the police and let them handle it. Maybe I should have, I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew she was right. I'd been drawn to the mystery, compelled to solve it myself. Frank wanted to bring you in gradually, Mom continued. Start you off with small jobs. People who really deserved it, child molesters, drug dealers, corrupt politicians, work your way up to the bigger targets. The bigger targets? Journalists who won't take hints. Environmental scientists who ask too many questions. Whistleblowers who think they're heroes. The young guy's voice hardened. People who threaten stability. My stomach lurched. You're talking about murder. We're talking about necessary maintenance, Mom said. Every society needs people willing to get their hands dirty, to make the hard choices. Your biological parents understood that in the end, they just picked the wrong side. What do you mean? They were working on a story about chemical contamination in groundwater. Traced it back to some very prominent families who'd been covering it up for decades. Families who employ us to handle complications. The pieces were falling into place, and I didn't like the picture they were forming. You work for the people you're supposed to be investigating. We work for order, Mom corrected. The same families that built this country, that provide jobs for millions of people. Sometimes that means protecting them from those who would destroy everything out of misguided idealism. I thought about the notebook. About 30 years of entries. 43 people dissolved in acid because they'd gotten too close to the truth. How many more were there? How many families like mine, scattered across the country, maintaining their own secret graveyards? You're sick, I said. We're efficient, the blonde woman replied. And we're offering you a choice. Join us willingly, and you'll be well compensated. You'll have purpose, direction, a real family that understands what you're capable of. And if I refuse? The young guy shrugged. Then you become container number 44. My grip tightened on the shovel. 3 against 1, and Gary was starting to stir behind me. Even if I managed to fight my way out, where would I go? If they were telling the truth about a network, running to the police might not help. How deep did this conspiracy go? I need time to think, I said. Time's up, Mom said sadly. Frank's death accelerated the timeline. The families are getting nervous about loose ends. They want this resolved tonight. What families? I demanded. Give me names. The same ones your parents were investigating, she said. The Harringtons, the Blackwells, the Ashfords, old money, old power. They've been steering this country's course for over a century. And they don't appreciate disruption. The names meant nothing to me, but the way she said them, with a kind of reverent fear, told me everything I needed to know. These weren't just wealthy families. They were the kind of people who could make evidence disappear, who could buy silence, who could reach into any investigation and twist it to their will. Your parents thought they could expose them, Mom continued. Thought the American people deserved to know the truth about who really makes the decisions. But truth is a luxury most people can't afford. Sometimes lies are kinder. So you killed them to protect the lie? We killed them? To protect millions of innocent people from the chaos that would have followed? The blonde woman said.
Do you have any idea what would happen if people lost faith in their institutions? If they realized how much of their reality was carefully constructed? Maybe they deserve to know. Maybe they deserve to sleep peacefully at night. Mom countered. To believe their votes matter, their jobs are secure, their children have a future. Your parents would have destroyed that illusion for what? A moment of moral superiority? I was quiet for a long moment, processing what they'd told me. My entire life had been built on a foundation of lies and murder. The people I'd called parents were killers. The family I'd grown up in was a front for something much darker. But there was something else bothering me, something that didn't quite fit. If you've been watching me my whole life, I said slowly, why didn't you know I'd figure this out? Why didn't you prepare for this? Mom's expression flickered. Just for a second. We, we underestimated how much you'd inherited from them. No, I said, realization dawning. You wanted me to find this. You wanted me to discover the truth. The silence stretched between us. Finally, the young guy spoke. Frank was getting old, he said. Sloppy, the families were losing confidence in him. They needed to know if his replacement would be up to the job. This was a test. And you passed, Mom said, something like pride creeping into her voice. You found the evidence, decoded the notebook, connected the dots. You even managed to take down Gary. She glanced at the unconscious man. He's been with us for 15 years. Most recruits couldn't have lasted 10 seconds against him. My head was spinning. You're saying this was all planned? Not all of it, the blonde woman admitted. Frank's death was unexpected. But his final instruction was clear. If anything happened to him, we were to bring you in, one way or another. And if I just called the police, then you would have failed the test, Mom said simply. And you'd be joining Frank in the crematorium. I stared at her. This woman who'd raised me, who'd tucked me in at night and made my Halloween costumes, who'd apparently been evaluating my potential as a serial killer my entire life. You're all completely insane, I said. We're survivors, she corrected. And now, you have a choice to make. You can join us, use your talents for the greater good, and live a life of purpose and meaning. Or you can cling to your naive idealism and end up like your biological parents. Gary groaned and started to sit up, blood trickling down his face. The young guy helped him to his feet, and I found myself surrounded again. 4 against 1 now, and my brief advantage was gone. What exactly would I be doing? I asked, buying time while I looked for another way out. Research. Mostly, the blonde woman said. You'd identify targets, gather intelligence, find their weaknesses. The actual elimination would be handled by others, at least initially. People like Mrs. Chen? Mrs. Chen was asking questions about unusual smells from the garage, Mom explained. Frank should have been more careful with the ventilation. She was getting suspicious, talking to neighbors. It was only a matter of time before she involved the authorities. So you dissolved her in acid. We eliminated a potential threat to the network, the young guy corrected. One person's inconvenience versus the stability of the entire system. And the homeless guy. He was sleeping rough behind the garage, Gary said, his voice slurred from the head injury. Saw Frank loading containers into his truck one night. Started asking for money to keep quiet. Blackmail? Amateur hour? Mom said dismissively. Frank handled it poorly. A professional would have eliminated him immediately instead of trying to negotiate. I thought about the notebook entry mentioning the new neighbor asking too many questions. Who was the new neighbor? Young couple? Moved in 3 weeks ago? The blonde woman replied. He's a freelance journalist. She works for the EPA. They've been very interested in the local water quality. They're investigating the contamination. They're following the same leads your parents did 30 years ago. Mom confirmed. Some stories never die. They just get passed down to the next generation of idealists. Are you going to kill them too? That depends, she said. Are you going to help us, or are you going to force us to clean up this mess the hard way? I looked around the garage, at the containers of dissolved human beings, at the notebook full of murder confessions, at the people who'd raised me, and were now calmly discussing multiple homicides. The weight of what I'd discovered was crushing. But there was something else. Something nagging at the back of my mind. A detail that didn't fit with the rest of their story. You said my parents were investigating the same families, I said slowly. The Harringtons, the Blackwells, the Ashfords. That's right. But you also said this network has been operating for 30 years. If my parents were killed in 1989, and they were investigating these families, then the network must have existed before they died. Mom's eyes narrowed slightly. What's your point? My point is that 30 years ago, I would have been the first entry in Dad's notebook. But JM 1987 came before I was even born. So either Dad was killing people before he adopted me, or you're lying about when this all started. The silence that followed was deafening. I could see them exchanging glances, recalculating their approach. You're right, Mom said finally. The network is older than we told you. Much older. How much older? Frank's father was doing this work in the 1960s, she admitted. And his father before him. Your adoption wasn't the beginning of our family's involvement. It was just a recruitment opportunity. So this has been going on for generations. The families we serve have been protecting their interests for over a century. The young guy said. They built the railroads, the oil companies, the banks. They've guided this country's development from the shadows. People like your parents, like the new neighbors, they threaten that stability by telling the truth, By spreading dangerous ideas, Gary corrected, still holding his head. Democracy is a nice theory, but it only works when people don't know too much. Give them too much information, and they make stupid choices. Look at what happened in the 1960s. All that protest and upheaval nearly brought down the whole system. Maybe the system deserved to be brought down. Maybe you sound exactly like your parents, Mom said. They had the same naive belief that people could handle the truth, that sunlight was the best disinfectant. But some things are better left in the dark. I thought about the new neighbors, about the young couple who'd moved in 3 weeks ago, a journalist and an EPA worker, following the same leads that had gotten my parents killed. They probably had no idea how much danger they were in. What's their names? I asked. The new neighbors. Why? Because if I'm going to join you, I need to know who we're dealing with. Mom studied my face for a long moment. Sarah and Michael Torres. She's written articles about corporate environmental cover-ups. She's a water quality specialist. They've been collecting soil samples from around the neighborhood. And you think they'll find something? We know they will, the blonde woman said. The chemical runoff from our disposal methods has been contaminating the groundwater for decades. Frank was supposed to upgrade the system years ago, but he kept putting it off. So it's not just about protecting the families anymore. It's about covering up your own crimes. It's about protecting the network, Mom corrected. If the contamination gets traced back to us, it won't just expose our operation. It'll lead investigators to every family we've worked with, every operation we've protected. Hundreds of people could go to prison. Good. Thousands of innocent people could lose their jobs, she continued. Entire communities could be devastated. Is your moral purity worth that much suffering? I wanted to say yes, but the question gave me pause. How many people were employed by the companies these families owned? How many communities depended on them? If the network was as extensive as they claimed, exposing it could have devastating consequences. But then I thought about the 43 containers, about Mrs. Chen and the homeless guy, about my biological parents who died trying to tell the truth. How many people had been silenced to protect the system? I need to see something, I said. What? The notebook. I want to read the entry about my parents. Mom hesitated, then nodded. Gary, get the notebook. Gary stumbled over to the workbench, still unsteady from the head injury. He picked up the composition notebook and handed it to me. I flipped through the pages until I found the entry dated September. My hands shook as I read my father's handwriting. David and Susan Martinez, investigative journalist working on groundwater contamination story, have traced chemical signatures back to Harrington Industries and Blackwell Chemical. Article scheduled for publication next month in Environmental Science Quarterly. Approached subjects at their apartment. David attempted to resist, but was overcome. Susan more cooperative once she understood the threat to their infant son. Both subjects questioned extensively about sources, research methods, and any backup copies of their work. Subjects confirmed they had sent copies to 3 colleagues, Dr. James Chen, UC Berkeley, Margaret Williams, Washington Post, and Robert Kim, EPA. All 3 contacts have been forwarded to appropriate handlers. Subjects dissolved successfully. Infant secured and placed with Frank and Mary for conditioning. Birth records altered to reflect new parentage. Official story. Parents died in car accident. Extended family unavailable for adoption. Family protected. Network maintained. Future asset acquired. I stared at the page, my vision blurring. My parents hadn't just been killed. They'd been tortured for information first. And I hadn't just been adopted. I'd been stolen, my identity erased, my history rewritten. Dr. James Chen, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Susan's research partner, Mom confirmed. He died in a climbing accident 2 weeks after your parents. Terrible tragedy. Margaret Williams? Car accident. Very sad. Robert Kim? Heart attack. He was only 42. 5 people dead, just to cover up one story. And how many others had died to protect the secrets my parents had been investigating? How many Dr. Chans and Margaret Williamses had been eliminated over the decades? You monsters, I breathed. We're protectors, Mom said firmly. Your parents' story would have exposed contamination that affected 13 states. Do you know what that would have meant? Mass panic. Lawsuits. Congressional investigations. Entire industries would have been destroyed. Maybe they should have been. Maybe millions of people would have lost their jobs, she countered. Maybe entire regions would have been economically devastated. Maybe the cure would have been worse than the disease. I looked at the notebook again. At 30 years of entries documenting systematic murder. How many people have you killed? Frank handled over 400 eliminations during his career, Gary said with something like pride. One of the network's most productive operators. 400 people. 400 problems solved, the blonde woman corrected. 400 potential disasters averted. 400 threats to stability neutralized. And now you want me to continue his work? We want you to help us protect the world your parents would have destroyed, Mom said. You have their investigative skills, their analytical mind. But you also have something they lacked. Perspective. You've seen what happens when people dig too deep, ask too many questions. You understand the cost of truth. I thought about the new neighbors, about Sarah and Michael Torres. Right now they were probably sitting in their kitchen, going over soil samples and water tests, getting closer to the same discoveries that had killed my parents. They had no idea that their investigation was about to make them targets. What happens if I say no? I asked. Then you join your parents, Mom said simply. And we find another way to handle the Taurus situation. And if I say yes, then you help us develop a plan to neutralize them without exposing the network. You use your skills to protect the system instead of destroying it. I looked around the garage one more time, at the containers of dissolved people, at the notebook full of murder confessions, at the 3 people who'd raised me and were now calmly discussing turning me into a killer. But I also thought about the bigger picture. If everything they told me was true, if this network really was as extensive as they claimed, then my decision here could affect thousands of people, maybe hundreds of thousands. I need guarantees, I said, such as, if I help you, no one else gets hurt unnecessarily. We find a way to stop the Torres investigation without killing them. That may not be possible, the blonde woman said. They're following the same leads your parents did. If we can't redirect them, elimination may be the only option. Then we find a way to redirect them. And if that fails, I was quiet for a long moment. Then I guess I'll have to live with the consequences. Mom smiled, and for the first time since I'd entered the garage, it looked genuine. You really are Frank's son. I'm not Frank's son, I said. I'm David and Susan Martinez's son, and I'm going to find out what happened to their story. The atmosphere in the garage shifted immediately. Gary's hand moved toward his jacket, and the young guy tensed. But Mom held up a hand, stopping them. What do you mean? She asked carefully. I mean, I'm going to finish what my parents started, I said. I'm going to find out what they discovered, who they were working with, and why it was worth killing 5 people to cover up. That would be very unwise, the blonde woman said. Maybe. But it's what they would have wanted. They're dead, Gary said bluntly. What they wanted doesn't matter anymore. It matters to me. I backed toward the garage door, still holding the shovel. I'm leaving now. Don't follow me. You can't run from this, Mom called after me. You can't run from what you are. Watch me. I turned and sprinted toward the door, expecting to hear footsteps behind me. But there was only silence. When I reached the driveway, I looked back to see them watching me from the doorway. You have 48 hours, Mom said quietly. After that, we'll have to assume you're a threat to the network. Then I guess I better work fast. I got in my car and drove away, my hand still shaking on the steering wheel. In the rearview mirror, I could see them standing in the driveway, watching me disappear into the night. I had 48 hours to uncover a conspiracy that had been decades in the making. 48 hours to finish what my parents had started, to find the truth that had cost them their lives. And I had no idea where to begin. The thing I did was drive to the nearest police station. I sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes, staring at the building, trying to figure out how to explain what I just discovered. How do you tell someone that your adoptive father was a serial killer, that your mother was part of a murder conspiracy, and that you just found 43 containers of dissolved human beings in your garage? More importantly, how do you convince them to take you seriously when the evidence could disappear overnight? I thought about what Mom had said about the network, about how deep it went. If they really had been operating for decades, protecting wealthy families with enough influence to make problems disappear, then walking into a police station might be walking into a trap. But I had to try something. I got out of the car and walked through the front doors. The desk sergeant looked up from his paperwork, a tired-looking man in his 50s with graying hair and suspicious eyes. Help you? I need to report a murder, I said. Multiple murders. He sighed and reached for a form. When did this occur? Over the past 30 years. His pen stopped moving. Excuse me? I found evidence that my father has been killing people for 3 decades. There are bodies. Or what's left of them. The sergeant studied my face for a long moment. Sir, have you been drinking tonight? I'm completely sober. I can show you where the evidence is. What kind of evidence? Human remains. 43 containers of them. And a notebook documenting every murder. He set down his pen and leaned back in his chair. And where is this evidence located? In my father's garage. He died last week, and I was cleaning out his stuff when I found it. Your father's name? Frank Morrison. He lived at 2047 Main. The sergeant's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Morrison, you said? That's right. Do you know him? I might have heard the name. Let me get Detective Rodriguez to take your statement. He picked up the phone and had a brief, quiet conversation. I couldn't make out the words, but his tone was careful, measured. When he hung up, he gave me a reassuring smile. Detective Rodriguez will be right out. Why don't you have a seat? I sat in one of the plastic chairs and waited. The station was quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional crackle of radio chatter. After about 10 minutes, a woman in her 40s approached me. Olive skin, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, tired eyes that had seen too much. Mr. Morrison, I'm Detective Rodriguez. I understand you want to report some murders? That's right. Why don't we talk in my office? She led me back through a maze of cubicles to a small room with a desk, 2 chairs, and a one-way mirror. Standard interrogation room setup. I wondered if that was intentional. Can I get you some coffee? Water? I'm fine. She sat across from me and pulled out a notepad. Tell me what you found. I took a deep breath and started from the beginning. The off-limits garage, Dad's death. Finding the keys. The chemical smell. The plastic sheeting. The containers of dissolved remains. The notebook with 30 years of murder confessions. Rodriguez listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting down notes. Her expression remained neutral, Professional? When I finished, she set down her pen. That's quite a story, she said. It's not a story, it's the truth. And you said this evidence is still in the garage? As far as I know. Unless they moved it after I left. I told her about Mom and the others. About the network. About the conversation in the garage. As I spoke, I watched her face carefully. She was good at hiding her reactions. But I caught something. A flicker of recognition when I mentioned the blonde woman. Can you describe this woman in more detail? Mid-40s. Short blonde hair. Professional dress. She seemed to know a lot about the operation. Any distinguishing features? She had a scar on her neck. Small but visible. Rodriguez wrote that down. And you said there were names in the notebook? Specific victims? Initials and dates. JM 1987, SK 1991, RH 1994. Plus full names for the more recent ones. Mrs. Chen. A homeless man. Named Willie. My biological parents. Your biological parents? I explained about the adoption. About how my parents had been investigative journalists killed for getting too close to the truth. Rodriguez listened intently, but I could tell she was evaluating my mental state as much as my story. Mr. Morrison? She said finally. These are very serious allegations. If what you're telling me is true, we're talking about multiple homicides spanning decades. I know how it sounds. Do you? Because it sounds like an elaborate conspiracy theory involving wealthy families, a network of suburban assassins, and your father is some kind of serial killer for hire. I have proof. You have containers of unknown liquid and a notebook that could contain anything. Without proper forensic analysis, there's no way to verify your claims. Then let's get forensic analysis. She was quiet for a moment. I'll need to make some calls. See about getting a warrant for the garage. In the meantime, I'd like you to stay available. Don't leave town. You think I'm crazy. I think you've been through a traumatic experience. Losing a parent is difficult under any circumstances. Sometimes grief can make us see things that aren't there. I'm not hallucinating. I didn't say you were. But finding a bunch of old chemicals and a notebook in your father's garage, there could be innocent explanations. I could see I was losing her. What about Mrs. Chen? She disappeared last month. That's not grief-induced hallucination. Mrs. Chen moved to Phoenix to live with her daughter. We verified that weeks ago. My stomach dropped. That's impossible. I saw her name in the notebook. Maybe someone with the same name. Or maybe your father knew about her move and made a note of it for some reason. What about the homeless man? Willie? I'd need more information to verify that. Homeless individuals often move around, and tracking them can be difficult. Everything I'd thought was proof was being explained away. Either Rodriguez was part of the conspiracy, or the evidence was less solid than I believed. Look, she said, I'll do some checking, talk to some people, see what I can find out. But I need you to understand that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. I understand. Good. Give me your contact information, and I'll be in touch within 48 hours. 48 hours. The same deadline Mom had given me. I wondered if that was a coincidence. I left the station feeling more confused than when I'd arrived. Either the police were part of the conspiracy, or I was losing my mind. Both possibilities were equally terrifying. I drove home and sat in my kitchen, staring at the phone. Who could I trust? Who could I turn to for help? Everyone I'd known my entire life might be part of this network. Or they might think I was having a breakdown. Then I remembered the notebook entry about my parents. Dr. James Chen, Margaret Williams, Robert Kim. All dead, according to Mom. But what if she'd been lying? What if one of them had survived? I opened my laptop and started searching. Dr. James Chen had indeed died in a climbing accident in 1989. Margaret Williams had died in a car crash the same year. But Robert Kim had died of a heart attack in 1990. But there was something odd about the obituary. It mentioned a brother, also named Robert Kim, who was 5 years younger. A brother who was still alive. I dug deeper, following digital breadcrumbs through social media and professional databases. Robert Kim Jr. was now Dr. Robert Kim Jr., an environmental scientist working at the EPA in Washington, D.C. Same field as his brother, same interests, same passion for environmental protection. It was past midnight when I finally found his contact information. I stared at the phone number for a long time, wondering if I was about to make a terrible mistake, but Mom had given me 48 hours, and I'd already wasted 6 of them. I dialed the number. It rang 4 times before a groggy voice answered. Hello? Dr. Kim? This is going to sound crazy, but I think someone murdered your brother. Silence. Then, who is this? My name is David Martinez. I think my parents worked with your brother and Martinez. His voice sharpened. David and Susan Martinez? You knew them? I knew of them. Bobby mentioned them a few times. Said they were good people, dedicated journalists. They died in a car accident. They were murdered. And so was your brother. Another long silence. I think you better start from the beginning. I told him everything about the garage, the notebook, the network, the conspiracy. Unlike Rodriguez, he didn't interrupt or question my sanity. He just listened, occasionally asking for clarification. Jesus, he said, when I finished. Bobby always suspected something was wrong with the official story. He said David and Susan were too careful to die in a car accident, and the timing was too convenient. What timing? They died 3 days before their article was supposed to be published. Bobby had been helping them with the technical aspects of their research. He was supposed to be a co-author. What happened to the article? It disappeared. The editor said there had been a computer malfunction, that all the files were corrupted. But Bobby had backup copies at home. He was planning to reconstruct the story himself. And then he died. Heart attack at 42. No family history of heart problems. Perfect health. The autopsy said it was a rare genetic condition. But you didn't believe it. I was in medical school at the time. I'd seen enough autopsies to know that certain drugs can cause heart attacks that look natural. But I was just a kid, and Bobby was dead, and everyone said I was being paranoid. Do you still have his research? Some of it. He mailed me a box of documents a few days before he died. Said he was worried about something, that if anything happened to him, I should make sure the information got out. What kind of information? Chemical analysis reports, contamination data, corporate documents. Everything David and Susan had been working on, plus Bobby's own research. My pulse quickened. Where is it now? In my basement. I've been carrying it around for 35 years, waiting for the right moment to do something with it. This is the right moment. Maybe. But if you're right about this network, if they really killed Bobby and your parents, then I'm probably next on their list. Especially if they find out I still have the evidence. They don't know about you. At least I don't think they do. They knew about Bobby. They knew about everyone else your parents contacted. You think they wouldn't have checked to see if he had family? Good point. So, what do? We need to be smart about this. If this network is as powerful as you say, we can't just walk into a newspaper office and dump everything on their desk. We need protection, verification, a way to ensure the story gets out even if something happens to us. What do you suggest? I have contacts in the scientific community. People who've been fighting corporate cover-ups for decades. They know how to handle sensitive information, how to protect sources. Can you trust them? More than I can trust the police or the media. Corporate infiltration is a real problem in environmental science. We've learned to be careful about who we share information with. How long would it take to put together a package? Give me 24 hours. I'll scan everything, make multiple copies, distribute them to trusted contacts. By tomorrow night, there'll be too many people who know the truth for the network to silence all of them. They gave me 48 hours before they consider me a threat. Then we'll beat their deadline. Dr. Kim, what if I'm wrong? What if I'm having some kind of breakdown and none of this is real? Then we'll have wasted a day digitizing some old environmental research. But if you're right, if this network really exists, then your parents died trying to expose something important. Don't you think they deserve to have their story told? Yeah, they do. Then get some sleep. Tomorrow we finish what they started. I hung up and sat in my kitchen, feeling something I hadn't felt since finding the garage. Hope. Maybe I wasn't crazy. Maybe there really was a conspiracy, and maybe I could do something about it. But first I had to survive the next 48 hours. I was exhausted, but I knew I wouldn't be able to sleep. Instead, I made coffee and started going through everything I could remember from the notebook. Names, dates, patterns. If this network was as extensive as Mom claimed, there would be traces of it everywhere. I started with the family she'd mentioned. The Harringtons, the Blackwells, the Ashfords. Old money, old power, she'd said. The kind of people who could steer a country's course from the shadows. The Harringtons were easy to find. Industrial dynasty dating back to the 1800s. Interest in mining, chemicals, and energy. Current head of the family was William Harrington III, worth an estimated $12 billion. His companies had been involved in numerous environmental controversies over the decades, always managing to avoid serious consequences. The Blackwells were similar. Old Southern money, built on cotton and tobacco, now diversified into banking and real estate. Multiple generations of political influence. Family members serving in Congress and state governments. The Ashfords were newer money, but no less powerful. Tech fortune made during the dot-com boom, now invested in social media and information systems. They had their fingers in everything from news aggregation to political advertising. 3 families. 3 different power bases, all with the resources and motivation to protect their interests from investigative journalists. And if Mom was telling the truth, they'd been doing it for decades. I was deep in research when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. Hello? David? It was a woman's voice, young and scared. Is this David Martinez? Who is this? Sarah Torres. I live next door to your parents' house. I think someone tried to break into our house tonight. My blood turned to ice. Are you okay? We're fine. Michael scared them off. But they left something behind. What kind of something? A note. It says, stop digging or you'll end up like the Martinezes. David, what does that mean? Who were the Martinezes? I closed my eyes. The network was already moving. Already threatening the Torres family. My 48 hours were turning into a death sentence for innocent people. Sarah, you and Michael need to get out of there. Right now. What? Why? Because the people who left that note aren't making an empty threat. They've killed before, and they'll kill again. You're scaring me. I'm trying to save your life. Pack a bag, get in your car, and drive somewhere safe. Don't tell anyone where you're going. David, what's going on? What does any of this have to do with your parents? My parents weren't my biological parents. My real parents were David and Susan Martinez. They were killed 35 years ago because they were investigating the same thing you are now. The water contamination? It goes deeper than that. Much deeper. And if you don't leave right now, you're going to end up like them. This is insane. I know it sounds insane. But please, just trust me. Get out of there and call me when you're safe. There was a long pause. Then Michael's getting our bags. We'll be gone in 10 minutes. Good. And Sarah? Don't go to the police. Don't trust anyone official. Just disappear until this is over. Over? When will it be over? Soon. I hope. I hung up and immediately called Dr. Kim. They're already moving, I told him. The network is threatening the Torres family. We're out of time. How long do we have? I don't know. Maybe hours. Maybe less. Then we do this now. I'll start scanning the documents. Can you get to Washington? I'm on my way. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. As I stepped outside, I saw a black sedan parked across the street. The windows were tinted, but I could see the silhouette of someone sitting in the driver's seat. They were watching me. I got in my car and started driving toward the highway. The sedan followed, keeping a careful distance. I took a few random turns, testing whether they were really tailing me. I had a choice to make. I could try to lose them, or I could confront them. Either way, I was committed now. There was no going back. I pulled into a 24-hour gas station and got out of my car. The sedan drove past, then circled back and parked at the far end of the lot. I walked over to it and tapped on the driver's window. The window rolled down, revealing a man in his 30s with military bearing and cold eyes. I didn't recognize him, but he clearly knew who I was. Mr. Morrison, he said. You're making this more difficult than it needs to be? I'm not Morrison. I'm Martinez. You're whoever we say you are. And right now, you're a problem that needs to be solved. Are you going to kill me? That depends on you. Your mother sent me to make you an offer. I already heard her offer. This is a new one. Walk away now, and we'll let the Torres family live. Keep digging, and they become containers 44 and 45. You're bluffing. Am I? He held up a cell phone, showing me a photo of Sarah and Michael Torres sitting in their car at a red light. We know where they are. We know where they're going. One phone call, and they have an accident. What do you want? Come with me. Talk to your mother. Work this out like a family. And if I refuse, then you'll be responsible for what happens next. I stared at him, weighing my options. If I went with him, I'd probably end up dead. But if I didn't, Sarah and Michael would definitely end up dead. I need to make a phone call first. No phone calls. Then no deal. He studied my face for a long moment. One call. Make it quick. I dialed Dr. Kim's number. When he answered, I said, the backup plan is in effect. Don't wait for me. Understood. I hung up and got into the sedan. The man drove without speaking, taking us back toward my parents' house. I wondered if I just made the biggest mistake of my life. What's your name? I asked. Marcus. How long have you been doing this? Long enough to know that idealists like you always think they can change the world. But the world doesn't want to be changed. It wants to be managed. By people like you? By people who understand that sometimes you have to break a few eggs to make an omelet. How many eggs have you broken? Not as many as your father did. Frank was old school, efficient, thorough, professional. You could learn a lot from him. He's dead, which is why we need a replacement. Someone with his skills but younger, more adaptable. Someone who can handle the digital age. You want me to become a killer. I want you to become a protector. There's a difference. We pulled into the driveway of my parents' house. Mom was waiting by the front door, looking worried and relieved at the same time. David, she said as I got out of the car. I'm so glad you came back. I came back to stop you from hurting innocent people. Sarah and Michael Torres aren't innocent. They're dangerous. They're following the same path that led to your parents' deaths. Maybe my parents were right. Your parents were naive. They thought truth was more important than stability. They thought people could handle knowing how corrupt their institutions really are. Maybe people deserve to know. Maybe people deserve to live peaceful lives without having their worldview shattered by inconvenient truths. Marcus opened the garage door, and we walked inside. The chemical smell was stronger now, and I could see that some of the containers had been moved. They were preparing for something. We've been cleaning house, Mom explained, getting rid of evidence, tying up loose ends. Your father left quite a mess. What happens now? Now you choose. Join us and help us protect the system that's kept this country stable for over a century. Or refuse and watch everything your parents died for disappear along with everyone who might have continued their work. That's not a choice. That's extortion. That's life, David. Sometimes you have to make difficult decisions to protect the people you care about. I don't care about your network. I care about the truth. The truth is that your parents were trying to expose chemical contamination that would have destroyed 13 states' economies. The truth is that stopping them saved millions of jobs and prevented massive social upheaval. The truth is that sometimes the greater good requires individual sacrifice. Whose greater good? Everyone's. The families we protect employ millions of people, provide essential services, maintain the infrastructure that keeps society functioning. Without them, the country would collapse into chaos. Maybe it should. Maybe you should think about what that would mean for ordinary people. For families trying to make ends meet. for communities dependent on industrial jobs, for everyone who benefits from the stability these families provide. She was good at this. I had to admit, making me question my own convictions, making me wonder if exposing the truth was worth the potential consequences. But then I thought about the 43 containers, about Mrs. Chen and Willie and all the other people who'd been murdered to protect this system. How many people have died to maintain this stability? I asked. Far fewer than would have died without it, Mom replied. We prevent disasters, David. We keep dangerous information from reaching people who can't handle it responsibly. You murder anyone who threatens your employer's profits. We eliminate threats to social order. There's a difference, not from where I'm standing. Marcus stepped forward. Enough philosophy. We have work to do. What kind of work? The Torres family is still out there. They have samples, data, research. They need to be stopped before they cause irreparable damage. I won't help you kill them. You won't have to, Mom said. We just need you to help us find them. How? You spoke to them tonight. You told them to run. Where would they go? I don't know. Think, David. You're a researcher, just like they are. If you were in their position, if you had dangerous information and needed to get it to the right people, where would you go? I thought about my conversation with Sarah. She'd sounded scared but determined. Michael was a freelance journalist, which meant he probably had contacts in the media. They'd want to get their story out quickly, before the network could stop them. They'd go to a news outlet, I said. Somewhere with resources to protect sources and verify information. Which outlet? I don't know. Any major newspaper or television network. That's not helpful. I told you I don't know. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed me another photo. This one showed Dr. Kim walking into an office building. Your friend in Washington is being very active tonight. Lots of phone calls. Lots of meetings. My stomach dropped. You're watching him too? We're watching everyone connected to the situation. Dr. Kim, the Torres family. You. We know about the documents, David. We know about the plan to distribute them. Then why haven't you stopped him? Because we're hoping you'll help us resolve this peacefully. Dr. Kim trusts you. He'll listen to you, convince him to destroy the documents, and we'll let everyone walk away. And if he won't, then we'll have to take more direct action. You'll kill him. We'll do whatever is necessary to protect the network. I looked around the garage at the containers of dissolved human beings, at the notebook, documenting decades of murders. This was my legacy, my inheritance. A family business built on systematic elimination of anyone who threatened the established order. I need to think about this, I said. You have 15 minutes, Mom replied. After that, we start implementing the backup plan. What backup plan? The one where everyone who knows about this situation has an accident. I believed her. These people had been killing for decades, and they wouldn't hesitate to kill again. Dr. Kim, the Torres family, anyone who'd been exposed to the information, they were all at risk. Can I make another phone call? No more calls. Then I guess we're done negotiating. David, please, you're forcing our hand. You forced my hand the moment you told me the truth about my parents. Marcus reached into his jacket and I saw the handle of a gun. Time's up. Wait, I said. I'll do it. I'll call Dr. Kim and tell him to destroy the documents. Mom smiled. I knew you'd see reason. But I want something in return. You're not in a position to make demands. I want the truth. All of it. I want to know exactly what my parents discovered, why it was so dangerous, and who ordered their deaths. That information is classified, then we don't have a deal. Mom and Marcus exchanged glances. Finally, she nodded. After you make the call, she said. After Dr. Kim destroys the documents and the Torres family stops their investigation, how do I know you'll keep your word? Because you're family, David. And family takes care of each other. I almost laughed. Family. The woman who'd stolen me as a baby, who'd raised me to be a killer, who'd spent 35 years lying to me about everything. That was her definition of family. Fine, I said. Give me the phone. Marcus handed me his phone, and I dialed Dr. Kim's number. It rang twice before he answered. David? Where are you? I'm with them, I said, looking directly at Mom. The network. They want me to tell you to destroy the documents. Are you safe? For now. But they're threatening to kill you and the Torres family if you don't comply. There was a pause. I see. Dr. Kim, I need you to do something for me. I need you to destroy everything. Everything? Everything. The documents, the research, all of it. They're not bluffing about the consequences. I understand. Good. Do it now while I'm on the phone. I need to hear you do it. I heard the sound of papers rustling, then the distinctive whoosh of a shredder. It went on for several minutes. 35 years of evidence being destroyed in real time. It's done, Dr. Kim said finally. All of it? All of it. Mom was smiling now, relief evident on her face. Marcus relaxed slightly, his hand moving away from his gun. Thank you, I told Dr. Kim. I'm sorry it had to end this way. Sometimes the truth isn't worth the cost, he replied quietly. I hung up and handed the phone back to Marcus. It's done. Good, Mom said. Now we can focus on the future. What about the Torres family? They'll be contacted and persuaded to drop their investigation. No violence necessary. And me? You come home. You take your father's place in the network. You help us protect the system that's kept this country stable for over a century. I looked around the garage one last time. At the containers. At the notebook. At the evidence of decades of systematic murder. My inheritance. I need some fresh air. I said. Of course. We walked outside together, Mom's arm linked through mine like we were taking a pleasant evening stroll. The night air was cool and clean, a stark contrast to the chemical smell of the garage. I'm proud of you, Mom said. You made the right choice. Did I? You saved lives tonight? Dr. Kim, the Torres family, even your own. That takes courage. It takes cowardice. It takes wisdom. Your parents thought they could change the world with one newspaper article. But the world doesn't change. It just finds new ways to maintain the balance. What happens now? Now, you learn the family business. Marcus will be your mentor. Help you develop the skills you'll need. Your first assignment will be simple. Monitoring potential threats. Gathering intelligence. Nothing violent until it becomes violent. Until it becomes necessary. We stood in the driveway for a while, looking up at the stars. It was peaceful, quiet, hard to believe we were discussing a conspiracy that had been murdering people for decades. Can I ask you something? I said. Of course. Do you ever feel guilty about what you've done? Mom considered the question carefully. I feel responsible, she said finally, for the choices I've made, for the people I've protected, for the stability I've helped maintain. But guilt? No. Guilt is what you feel when you've done something wrong. And you don't think you've done anything wrong? I think I've done what was necessary. Sometimes that's the same thing as right. Sometimes it isn't. But it's always necessary. Even murdering my parents? Even that. Her honesty was almost refreshing. No justifications. No excuses. Just a calm acceptance of what she'd done and why she'd done it. I understand now, I said. Understand what? Why they had to die. Why everyone who threatens this system has to die. It's not about money or power or protecting the wealthy. Then what is it about? Control. The network doesn't serve the families. The families serve the network. You've created a system where the truth is whatever you decide it is, where reality is whatever serves your purposes. And anyone who threatens that control has to be eliminated. Mom smiled. You really are your father's son? I'm not your son. I'm not Frank's son. I'm David and Susan Martinez's son. You're whoever you choose to be. Then I choose to be someone who finishes what his parents started. I pulled out my own phone and hit a button. Immediately, Dr. Kim's voice came through the speaker. Did you get all that? Every word, he replied. The recording is already uploaded to multiple servers. Even if they kill me now, it's too late. Mom's face went white. You recorded our conversation? I recorded everything. The garage, the notebook, the containers, your confession. It's all documented. The documents were destroyed. The documents Dr. Kim had were destroyed. But I photographed every page of that notebook before I left the garage. I sent copies to 12 different news outlets before I came back here. Marcus was reaching for his gun. But I held up my hand. Don't, I said. It's over. The story is already out there. Killing me won't change anything. You have no idea what you've done, Mom said, her voice shaking with rage. The chaos this will cause, the lives that will be destroyed. Good. Maybe it's time for some chaos. Maybe it's time for people to know the truth about who really runs this country. They can't handle the truth. Then that's their choice to make. Not yours. I started walking toward my car. Behind me, I could hear Mom and Marcus arguing in urgent whispers. They were probably debating whether to kill me anyway, whether my death might help contain the damage. David, Mom called after me. If you do this, there's no going back. The network will never stop hunting you. Let them hunt, I replied without turning around. I'm done running. I got in my car and drove away, leaving them standing in the driveway. In my rearview mirror, I could see them making phone calls, probably alerting other members of the network, probably planning damage control, but it was too late. The truth was out there now, spreading through the digital ecosystem like wildfire. By morning, the whole world would know about the network, about the murders, about the conspiracy that had been operating in plain sight for decades. My phone rang. Dr. Kim, are you safe? He asked. For now. What's the status on the story? It's everywhere. Every major news outlet, every social media platform. The recording of your conversation is going viral. People are calling it the biggest conspiracy exposure in modern history. What about the Torres family? Safe. They're in protective custody along with their research. Turns out they had more evidence than anyone realized. And the network? Scrambling. We're already seeing arrests, investigations, congressional hearings being scheduled. The whole thing is collapsing. I pulled over and sat in my car, suddenly exhausted. It was over. After 35 years, the truth about my parents' deaths was finally coming to light. The network that had killed them was finally being exposed. Dr. Kim? Yes? Do you think they would have been proud? My parents? I think they would have been amazed. They spent years trying to expose a small part of this conspiracy. You exposed the whole thing in one night. I had help. Yes, you did. From people who believed in the same things they did. Truth, justice, accountability. The idea that people deserve to know what's being done in their name. What happens now? Now the real work begins. Trials, investigations, reform. It'll take years to untangle everything, to hold everyone accountable. But the foundation is cracked. The network will never be the same. And me? You'll be fine. You're a hero, David. You did what your parents couldn't do. You finished their story. I hung up and sat in the dark, thinking about Frank and Mary Morrison, the people who'd raised me. They'd been killers, conspirators, monsters, but they'd also been my parents for 35 years. They taught me to ride a bike, helped me with homework, been proud of my achievements. The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Sarah Torres. Thank you for saving our lives. We won't forget what you did. Then another. From an unknown number. Your parents would be proud. A friend. Then dozens more. From journalists, activists, ordinary people who'd been inspired by the story. The response was overwhelming, humbling, terrifying. I started the car and drove toward the highway. I had no idea where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay here. The network was broken, but not destroyed. There would be revenge attempts, cleanup operations, efforts to salvage what they could. But for the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. David Martinez, son of David and Susan Martinez, investigative journalists who died trying to expose the truth. I was finally home. As I drove into the night, I thought about the story that would dominate headlines for months to come. The network that had operated in shadows for decades. The wealthy families who'd bought silence through murder. The suburban assassins who'd dissolved their victims in acid. It would be called the Morrison Files, after the notebook that had started it all. Frank Morrison's meticulous records would become evidence in the largest conspiracy trial in American history. And somewhere in that story, buried in the details about chemical contamination and corporate cover-ups, would be the truth about David and Susan Martinez, two journalists who died trying to protect their country from the people who claimed to serve it. Their story was finally told. Their son had made sure of that. The truth was out there now, spreading like wildfire through a world that was ready to hear it. And no amount of acid, no network of killers, no conspiracy of silence could ever dissolve it away.